Welcome back to the Small Business Show. We're going to get into a different story now.
We are, and I think it's the kind of business that I've actually needed in the past, but I don't know how many people need this kind of business.
I just imagine that the lady who's with us today, Kersten Kramer from Premier Focus Translations, probably knows a little bit about the different languages that people engage with and businesses engage with. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So tell me about your business and tell me just how you got into it.
Well, I originally grew up in Germany and moved here in my early 20s. And in leaving, one of my goals was to stay in touch with my native language and with the culture. And I was invited to start translating for family and friends. And I thought, this is great. It allows me to stay in touch with my native tongue. And then eventually down the road, someone ended up paying me for the work. And I thought, this pays well, so maybe there's a business to be had.
I remember you sharing that story before.
How many languages do you speak?
I'm bilingual, English, German.
Oh,
but
I'd love to speak 2 languages.
In the business that I work with, there's all the major languages are covered.
So, yeah, I was going to say, how do you do that then if you only speak one language?
That's a natural extension. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
That's probably the most asked question. People that connect with me at networking events always will say, well, how many languages do you speak?
Yeah.
And my business is really built on the back of all the freelance translators that I connect with from all over the world who speak multiple languages.
Are there, like, I think I've mentioned this to you before, I only know you personally as a translator, and I've known one other person online. Is it a saturated industry, or the few and far between?
It's actually an up-and-coming industry, and immigration has quite a lot to do with that. With the influx of immigration that we're seeing here in Canada as well, there's really a change in the ethnic landscape that you have of the consumers that are purchasing services. So about 20% of folks that are living in Canada have a mother tongue other than English. And in order to work with those consumers, we need to address that when we're selling our services.
So that's a growing element of your business, I imagine. I mean, if I was to ask you, like, if you look at the demographic of your business, how many types of organizations are, I mean, you're doing a lot of work with business, you're doing a lot of work with, like, government organizations, that kind of thing. Where do you find, like, your clients are coming from?
One element would be all of the folks immigrating into Canada needing to have their paperwork translated, driver's license, birth certificates, marriage certificates.
Never thought about that.
That's a smaller segment of the business. And then, of course, business customers that need packaging, websites translated, documentation, legal documents, websites.
Curiosity I have is, how do you know, or how do you gauge the accuracy of the work people are doing for you? Because, I mean, you speak 2 languages, but you must have a way of knowing that what you're getting is because it's got to be absolutely correct.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, there's certainly a quality control element that we have built into the business. So every work that's being done usually goes through 3 or 4 different people, through a project manager, then you have the translator as well as the proofreader, and then it comes back to a person that works on the desktop publishing and one final look by the desktop.
Wow, that's quite
See, not a lot of people would know that.
I just thought
a lot of elements there.
Yeah, I didn't think it was as complicated as that.
Right.
You've written an amazing article about doing business in Quebec. Does that mean that you personally have a lot of work in Quebec in the translation area?
Well, because we have the Quebec French Board of Language that stipulates that folks that want to do business with Quebec need to have all of their materials translated to Quebec French. A large portion of our business goes into Quebec French. So there's a lot of companies here in town even that want to sell their chocolates or their gadgets into Quebec and need to have all of their documentation translated.
But I think people need to understand the politics and the regulation behind, particularly operating as one example in the province of Quebec. A lot of people would just assume they can just do what they're doing here.
Can anybody be a translator because they can speak, say, 2 languages? I mean, do you need any degrees or designations, or is it something that's supervised and looked after so they do a good job, or can anybody do it?
It's changing over time now as we're seeing more regulations around translations as well. So some of the larger companies will look for certified translators that have been accredited by the Ontario Translators Association, whereas some companies are not in need of that and will be quite content to work with somebody that will have worked, say, in the medical field for 20 years and then switch to translating in their native language.
So is this a thing, you know, in the high schools and colleges that a lot of students want to do, you know, when they go into the workforce, and many of them say, I want to be a translator?
Some of them do. Some of them start right off the get-go because they grow up in a multilingual household, maybe surrounded by 2 or 3 different languages, and decide, you know what, this is the way of the future, and I can truly see myself working with language, and start to study it. Whereas other folks go on a different path and choose a different career at first, but then realize that their second language would be able to allow them to take a different path and start translating.
It's really useful.
No, I think that whole demographic's changing in Canada because, you know, there used to be English and French, but now if you look at the percentages of the populations and the different ethnicities, it's really become more complex, I imagine, as a business doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Is it a business that you would encourage, say, high school students, if they were interested in it? Is it a good business to be in? I mean, do you find it rewarding? Are you passionate about it?
There we go.
I don't believe it's something you should go into just because it makes good money, do you, really?
Well, there are students that will choose to get engaged with translation just to do something on the side besides their studies, because it allows you to set your own hours. You can just say, you know what, I'm just going to translate on the weekend. I'll study during the week and translate on the weekend, and then earn a little bit of extra income. So you're essentially a freelance worker, and you're setting your own hours and your own volume of work. You know exactly how much you're able to take on.
Has it changed since you've been in business so many years? Do you see many changes coming up in the industry?
Certainly with the regulations and the qualifications, changes have taken place, but also with the rate structure, for sure.
So does this affect you in any way, or are you one of those people that steadily, you know, it doesn't impact you because you embrace all these changes?
Absolutely. Technology plays a part in that as well, right?
I mean, now you can go on Google and put in something and translate it. Who knows how accurate it is, right? No.
Do we really want to start talking about
No,
Google
we don't.
Translate?
I'm just saying, you know, but people need to realize it's not as easy as it is.
But it kind of reads backwards. When some of my friends, it says, you know, I got a friend from Brazil, so it says, translate this, and it doesn't sound right.
No, that's my point. It's just never really accurate,
And
right?
there is a point, there is a place for Google Translate. I have people that come to me and say, you know what, I just received a letter from my long-lost cousin from Brazil, and I just want to know what he has to say. And we would have a minimum charge that is, for some people, out of reach. So they would go to Google Translate and type it in and at least get the gist of the document so that they know what the letter is talking about.
I would recommend if it's business or something really legal.
Sure, you know.
Go to a certain
Well, what's important is when you're dealing with like legal terms, when you're dealing with, let's say, the pharmaceutical industry, when you're dealing with something that has to be very accurate.
Don't go to Google.
No, I hope not.
And some of our clients will actually choose to have us create glossaries for them. So we just recently did software translation to 36 languages. That's been ongoing for several years already in the renewable energies field. And we've actually created a glossary for all of these different languages. And that's been updated with every go-around that we have every year. So we keep adding to that glossary, and everybody on the team works with the same glossary in order to stay consistent.
And you know, it's really weird. I'm not being rude, but you kind of fell into the business. Whereas we talked to a young guy earlier who said he wanted to be an entrepreneur. I'm not being rude, but what a good business to fall into, because you enjoy it, you're very good at it, it pays the bills.
And imagine with the globalness of the work you do, that you're getting a lot of people contacting you to do work, and probably you're hearing from places that maybe you didn't even think you'd hear from.
Right. It's a very versatile business. You never know what's going to happen any given day of the week. Today it might be medical, tomorrow might be legal, the day after that it might be packaging for a box of chocolates. So you learn a lot about the different industries, which is fun.
You know.
Wow, I don't know what to say, because I can just speak English, but barely. Nobody understands me when I talk fast.
So I just touch on that compliance side again. I mean, I think what you're saying is the regulatory changes, and it's happening in a lot of industries. You need to be ahead of that curve, and I think you embrace that very strongly in what you do.
Exactly, and we usually are happy to also guide clients through that process. It sounds intimidating, but it's really not. A lot of people will just come to us with their documentation, and we're able to kind of take them by the hand and show them through.
And I don't think enough, sorry.
No, you first.
I was going to say, I don't think people understand how integrated and how it's not easy to do.
Right.
And I think people don't necessarily understand that.
My question is, do you get to meet your clients, or is this all an online resource kind of thing?
We do get to meet our clients from time to time, but not very often, because a lot of the work that we do is digital. So we're dealing with a lot of digital documents that are just being sent back and forth by email.
It's the whole face of business now, though,
It's
right?
so interesting, it really is. I didn't realise, did you?
Yeah, I just, you know, you probably use a lot of different softwares. I mean, even to be involved in developing language for software, you know, for all those industries you were talking, or like all those companies in that particular industry you're talking about. Even that technological knowledge, I think, it's very important, but it's also not easy to do.
Right.
So that expertise is important, absolutely.
For sure. And the translators themselves are the ones, too, that have to stay on top of that software.
Yeah.
Right? And the knowledge for desktop publishing software, translation software.
And it's been great having you on this show today. It's an interesting world that we don't really talk about, and find there's a real importance to people in understanding language. And thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you for having me.
That was amazing.
Absolutely. And we'll be right back on the Small Business Show. Welcome back to the Small Business Show. You know, Linda, I think we got into some areas that I've never really thought about in terms of translation and the sophistication of that business, and it's not as easy as people think it is. And even the numbers, which you actually started to get excited about.
I thought, I don't want to get into translation, I can just barely speak English. And then the beautiful bookkeeper we had on earlier, I don't want to do my books, I can't add up.
I love numbers, as you know, but I mean, Judith is great because I like her business approach to bookkeeping. It's not just about doing numbers, it's how you use the numbers.
Do you know what's important now? Because for our viewers, listening, watching, whatever you want to do really, basically they will now have some information. Do I want to be a bookkeeper? Do I need a bookkeeper? Do I need a translator? Can I use Google? Whatever.
No, we're going to go away from Google, you know.
But I have loved having these two particular young ladies on, have you?
Absolutely. There's been a lot of ladies, but I think we've already said that, right? Maybe I am.
I was actually surrounded by guys the other day. It was amazing.
Yeah, amazing. You have 4 guys around you. I got the reciprocal today, right?
We have fun on the Small Business Show.
Absolutely. So, you know, we're going to come back to you with another episode of the Small Business Show. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.